Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Interloop Microsoft Fabric webinar. We're super excited to have you here today. We're going to be talking about how you can bring your data into the era of AI. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and introduce the speaker. So if each of you wouldn't mind just saying hello and introducing yourselves.
Sure, I can start. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Frost, and I'm the lead business intelligence analyst here at Interloop.
Hi, my name is Ralph Jaquez, and I'm a senior data architect here at Interloop.
And I'm Tony Berry, co-founder of Interloop, and today I'm going to be talking about data science.
And then I'm Jordan Berry. I'll be the host today, as well as talking about a couple of the key features of Microsoft Fabric. Before we dive in, just want to talk about the agenda and what we're going to cover today. So really what we'd like to start with is what we call the data challenge and why tools like Interloop and Microsoft Fabric really exist. We'll talk about what a modern approach to data and what a not so modern approach to data looks like. Then we'll really define what Microsoft Fabric is. So for those that are either curious about Fabric or just getting started, we'll go through kind of what it is and what it isn't. And we'll talk about how data really is a team sport and what we mean by that. Then we'll actually dive into a live demo and show how Interloop and Microsoft Fabric can be applied to some real world use cases. We'll talk about AI readiness, since we're all super excited about AI and how to use that for our businesses. And then at the end, we'll leave a little room for some Q&A. Before we get started, I'll pass things off to Tony to do a quick intro, and then we'll dive right in.
And so one of the things that we really focus on at Interloop is helping organizations achieve more with that data. And we do that through a concept of what we call mission control. We really want to be your mission control for all things data, so you can focus on the insights and business decisions associated with that. And we do that really through three areas. We have people and expertise, which we're going to talk about today. We then have a proven process that you can do to become data-driven. And then finally, we have the technology, the combination of Microsoft Fabric and also our proprietary platform. And those three things we think really are that mission control that help you achieve more with your data. And why is this important? Well, something that we call the data challenge. It's mind-boggling how much digital data is generated in today's world. An interesting fact is they say about 90% of the world's digital data was created in less than the last 2 years. I think that's just amazing, the volume of data that actually is generated each day. And that data puts out signals that do help a lot with making decision making. But regrettably, a recent poll said most organizations feel they're using less than 1% of the data that's available to them. So obviously, it's not a simple challenge, right? It's not something that there's some easy button that helps you solve this. And so you may ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it really worth the effort? Well, the interesting thing is McKinsey did a study recently, and what they found is those companies that start to treat data as really a critical portion of the organization, often it's called the fuel of today, those that tap into that are 23 times more likely to acquire new customers. And what's really interesting is not only do they acquire those new customers, but they're 6 times more likely to retain their customers. And the one that is really most important, they're 19 times more likely to be profitable because of the fact that they're making their business decisions off of the insights the data is providing them. So it's definitely worth the effort. And that's why Interloop is here, is to really help on that journey. Now, often you don't think about the fact of data as, well, I just need data. It's around what are the pain points or the opportunities that you're experiencing in the organization. So if you hear things like, well, gaps in our data are holding us back, or we can't answer key business questions, or I need data from system A, but I'm working in system B. And the two that I really like is the one on the left at the bottom is it takes forever to pull together the data we need. We hear that very often. And so that speed to insights become very important. And then the other one is I wish I could be notified when certain conditions occur. I'm sure we've all thought that, gosh, if I had only known at the moment when that happened, I could have made a good business decision. And so those are the things, if you're starting to hear that from yourself, if you're thinking that, or people in the organization are expressing it, then you probably are hitting that data challenge, and we're really here to help. And one of the things that we looked at is, well, people have been trying this for several decades, and we knew as we looked into this, is current approaches are just not working to solve these problems. And so we knew there had to be a better way. And that's actually what Ralph's going to talk to you about.
So let's first talk about the old way that we use to do these integrations. If we had data in one system and we wanted to get it over to another system, typically what we would do was build an integration, copy the data elements over, and now make that data available. You can see how that approach, though, as we have more systems, can get a little bit complicated. The data is being duplicated. Also, the efforts for managing and transforming that data are also duplicated. This means higher costs and just higher management challenges, moving data around from system to system. So we recognized probably several years ago that there was a better way. And that newer way of doing things is looking at the data in a bit more of a holistic sense. Can we consolidate, get all that data into one central repository? So we're doing the extraction once, we're doing any transformations, we're doing any data refinement or cleaning just one time. And then we can consider, how do we need to consume that data? Is it a dashboard in Power BI? Is it a report? Is it some type of action that we want the data to do? Or perhaps we want to use a machine learning model or AI to actually help us gain more insights. By looking at that data in a more holistic sense, bringing it all into one place, that really allows us to get those insights in a bit more of an efficient and effective way. And in the following slide, we'll see how one approach that we use is the medallion architecture. And you can kind of see that's what this diagram is describing. We look at the data sources, we're going to extract all of the data from those sources. We're going to focus on organizing them once, curating them or preparing them for whatever the consumption is that we want. And again, if we look at it this way, it's one sort of overall general pipeline that really helps us to avoid that duplication that we were talking about earlier. So we save on costs, we save on effort, and ultimately all of the departments or all of the areas in our business that need that data will get the same quality of data that they need. Of course, to do this, the other challenge has been we build up a really large set of tools. We have one tool to do this, one tool to do that, and we're jumping between tools. Fabric adds a new element to that. And let's go over to Jordan to see what that is.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. And like Ralph mentioned, if you're a small or growing organization and you're trying to build a data platform, you're recognizing that you're collecting this data, but maybe not unlocking its true potential. Traditionally, it's been a bit of a challenge. You have to glue together, a data pipeline tool, a storage tool, an observability tool, and that's really what Microsoft recognized in the market as well. And so that when they introduced Microsoft Fabric, they really talk about it as a unified analytics platform that brings together all these tools. So as a data engineer, as a data analyst, as a data scientist, we don't have to worry so much about the infrastructure, provisioning things, making sure everything can talk to each other. We can really focus on creating that business value. And that's what we're so excited about at Interloop, is that Fabric really is the fuel that you then can apply towards your business challenges and problems. And so when you look at the data landscape of Microsoft Fabric, it's quite vast. So what they've really done is they've glued together all these different tools, everything from data warehouses, data factory, which is basically the pipelines that you use. They've added in data science capabilities, real-time streaming, Power BI, and really the key element of this is that it's all on top of what's called OneLake. And OneLake really is a single store for your organization. You can think of it, much like Dropbox or OneDrive is for your files. OneLake is for your data. So it's a place for you to house all this and use it for your purposes. Really what we've done at Interloop is we've kind of supplemented this powerful data platform. So on the left-hand side, you've got all those sources of data. So whether your data resides in databases, in different applications, sometimes data needs to be held in files or even kind of IoT sensor type devices. We have several clients that are using devices in the field to capture key insights. All that data can be consumed, stored, modeled, prepared, and ready to be consumed using Interloop and Microsoft Fabric. And then really what we focus on the right-hand side as a business user, this is where you get a lot of that core business value. So whether it's helping you build a dashboard really quickly so you get those always-on insights into your organization, whether it's building something like Copilot, which is a new concept from Microsoft, is how do you build an AI assistant that not only helps you be more effective, but actually knows your business. And we're going to touch on that a little bit later on how that might look in your organization. Whether you want to build predictive models, so using AI and machine learning to figure out not only what's happened, but what potentially could happen, and being more proactive and intentional with your business decisions. And then finally, we're seeing a lot of organizations leveraging what we call smart sync. So instead of creating traditional heavy two-way syncs where you're duplicating data like Ralph mentioned, we're now actually just serving key elements of data back up into operational tools like CRM, ERP, et cetera, so that as a a user of those systems, I can better serve my customer, I can better understand them, I can make better decisions, but I'm not having to worry about all this heavy lifting to get there. But to do that, you really need a lot of different roles. And so that's why I'll pass it off to Megan.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. We really like to look at data as a team sport, and to be effective and efficient as a data-driven organization, it's really difficult when you have siloed work streams amongst data engineers, data analysts, data scientists, etc. So collaboration amongst multiple roles brings in numerous benefits, like incorporating diverse perspectives, which can lead to better insights. It increases shared ownership and accountability throughout the entire team. And it involves many more members of the organization, from frontline employees to top executives, creating buy-in throughout the entire organization. And now Microsoft Fabric has launched Copilot, so organizations have AI teammates built right in. Copilot combines the power of large language models with your data in Microsoft 365 apps to produce a really powerful productivity tool. In Fabric specifically, Copilot can be used for data science, data engineering, data factory, and Power BI. For engineers, it can assist with things like code generation and code completion. And for Power BI, it can help generate report page summaries and automatically create reports with just a simple prompt, which makes data exploration accessible to people of all technical levels throughout the organization. And in a few minutes, we're going to get into a demo that shows some of the capabilities like this in Fabric. So I'll hand it back over to Jordan to kick that off.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, and like she mentioned, we want to talk about how can all these different roles use Interloop and Microsoft Fabric to create value for an organization. And so what we're going to cover today is an organization called Palmetto EV. So this is a fictitious company, but is very synonymous with the types of organizations that we work with every day. And so some quick background on who they are. Essentially, they're a US-based manufacturer that produces electric vehicles. So everything from golf cars to electric bikes. Really, they are going through that innovation process of how do we digitally transform, collect all this data, not only on our manufacturing process, but our customers, our marketing, so that they can make really intelligent business decisions. And so they're a small but growing organization. They don't have a ton of IT resources, but they know that they've got all this powerful data that they can use to better service their customers. And so what we're going to walk through now is a demo using Microsoft Fabric to solve some of their key business challenges. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ralph.
So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into the Fabric portal, and we're going to look at different roles and how those different roles can benefit using Fabric. And so we'll start with the data engineer. So as we mentioned earlier, if we look at Interloop and Fabric as that central repository for all of the data, getting all of the data into one place. When we look at our portal, when we look at Fabric, we're going to have all of the tools that we need in order to accomplish that, and also much more. Our very first step is getting the data somewhere. What is that somewhere? Well, we've got various lake houses, and you can see those represented here: bronze, gold, and bronze, silver, and gold. And this is that medallion architecture that we talked about earlier. It really just represents a pipeline of sorts, or the data is getting cleaner, more useful, and ready for consumption as it goes through that process from bronze to gold, from bronze to silver to gold. But what is that process? Well, right here in Fabric, we can look at the pipelines or the other artifacts, the other items that help us to work on that data. So at Palmetto EV, we've got a CRM system, we've got an ERP system, and there's a couple of others. How do we get that data out of those systems? Well, one of the tools that we have available to us in Fabric is a data pipeline. We'll jump into it just to summarize and see very quickly what it does. It uses these activities to go out to that CRM system and copy that data over into our Bronze Lakehouse. Very similar for the ERP. And then we have the ability to use some other tools like notebooks and data pipelines to actually transform that data and start to prepare it for consumption. Again, thinking about data as a team sport, the data engineer has just one step in that process, but being able to use the same tool as all of the other team members will allow them to really pass that baton over. And just also to show right here in Fabric, we have the ability to see what's happening. So we can go to the monitoring hub here. We can look at notebooks, pipelines that are running. It's easy to tell if there are any errors or issues and be able to go right to that task or that process and resolve it, make the changes that need to be made. So again, whatever your role as a data engineer and the following roles, it's easy to see what's going on. It's easy to work on these items, but most importantly, it's also easy to hand off the items. So let's hand off now to Megan and see how an analyst would use the work that the data engineer has done in order to continue that process.
Sure. Thanks, Ralph. Okay, so you can see my Fabric portal view is very similar to Ralph's because we're all using the same interface. But where I come in a little bit differently is now I get to work in parallel with the data engineer instead of the handoff dependency-based workflow that the old way typically uses. So once Ralph or another data engineer gets the initial medallion structure populated in the workspace, I can connect directly to the SQL endpoint associated with the Gold Lakehouse. And we use the Gold Lakehouse because it's the cleanest version of the data to connect to a Power BI report. So here you can see I can just left click, click on these ellipses, and I can create a new report in a matter of 3 clicks, which if you've used Power BI before, you'll know that this is an incredibly faster way to connect to data and start building a report than before. And so then with some more time and collaboration, analysts can start to create dashboards to help end users make data-driven decisions. So I've put together a sample dashboard here for Palmetto EV that has our main page with KPIs across the top. We can also look at shipments and sales. And then we can also look at things, predictive analytics like customer churn and mean time between failure for machines. So with all the data being in one spot, semantic models or the data set underneath this dashboard can be repurposed for multiple projects or reports instead of having to create a slightly different data set each time to handle every analytical nuance necessary. And now with Fabric, we can even take it one step further, and we can use this really powerful feature called the semantic link, which now allows analysts to efficiently help data engineers model data by harnessing the strength of DAX, which is the coding language used in Power BI. DAX handles things like sliding date ranges very, very performatively, so it can really help to model data. Then we can write those results back to the lakehouses for other engineers or analysts to utilize. So now we're working together to build analytical models that are scalable and repeatable and makes our solution outcome velocity so much faster. And not only can analysts use the semantic models that data engineers create, we can also use outputs from the machine learning models that data scientists create in the Fabric workspace, which is what I've surfaced here for the mean time between failure and the churn risk dashboard pages. So in a minute, Tony's going to show you how the predictive model was created underneath this, but I was able to bring in his results here. So the benefit of having the data in one place allows analysts to create well-rounded dashboards that use both day-to-day analytics plus AI predictions. So now I'm going to hand it over to Tony to show how this model was created underneath.
Great, thanks, Megan. So appreciate that. And as Megan mentioned, I'm going to show, kind of the way that churn calculation was done. And so the first thing I'm going to do is, just like Ralph and Megan both showed you, I've logged into Fabric. But interestingly, I've come in with the data science view. And so now as a data scientist, I have a different set of assets that I want to work with. And so a couple of things that I want to do is I want to build, a notebook to do some of that churn analysis, but then I'm going to do things like ML models, and I'm going to try and pick the best model to use for predicting customer churn. And so you can see here, I've got the things that are important to me, and I'll show each of these real quickly, but this is where I'm going to do most of my work, is in this churn notebook. But then I'm going to run some experiments so I can pick one of 3 different models that I built. And one of these is called random forest. The other one is called a light gradient booster model. So they always have great names in the data science space, but we're going to kind of talk through that. And so we'll show how that then gets pushed back up into Megan's dashboard. So I'll go through this pretty quickly, but this is probably a webinar in and of itself just to walk through this. But what is great, just like Megan described, you've got data engineers working in parallel with business analysts and BI analysts, and now you can have a data science working on that exact same data set. So here, what I'm going to do is same Palmetto data that Megan was just showing you, but now I'm going to build a machine learning notebook, and I'm going to load an historical list of 10,000 customers over the last 5 years. And the things I'm interested in is a bunch of demographic information features like what is their salary, what is their income level, where are they located, are they male or female, what's their age, etc. And hoping that some of those features or capabilities will help us predict churn. So the likelihood of somebody that might be leaving or no longer using Palmetto's products and services. So what we're going to do is just 6 steps. We're going to load some libraries to do this. One nice thing about Fabric too, it's totally open source compatible. So I can pull in, scikit-learn and LightGBM, et cetera, to do some of those models. I'm going to load that history. I'm going to then explore the data. So often with data science, you may even need to create data. And so we'll talk about that in a minute, where I need to actually simulate some data that might be missing. I'm then going to train those models. I'm then going to evaluate those models and pick the best fit. And then I'm going to run the churn analysis on the current set of active customers and start to predict who may be at churn risk, so the sales team can reach out and actually have some conversations with the actual customer themselves. So a lot of steps here. I'm just going to kind of quickly show some of those views. But this is the data that we're loading. So as I mentioned, it's 10,000 historical customers with 14 attributes, things like credit score, geography, et cetera. The data looks like this. And essentially, we're going to load it, but I'm going to use something called SMOTE. And SMOTE, again, great name, synthetic minority oversampling techniques. But this essentially creates data in the data set that may be missing so that we can get a better model fit. So I'm not going to bore everybody with going through this, but basically work through the data. And what is nice, and this is a very common theme that we see with Fabric, it's a combination of low code and low code that even generates code. So this is a good example where I'm using something called Data Wrangler that's inside Fabric. I launch it up, and I can do something that data scientists do, which is called one-hot encoding. Again, a fancy name, basically saying I'm going to convert all text to numbers so that the model can simulate and run on it more efficiently. And so the Wrangler, by working with it, will actually generate the code for me. Then I can run it. Then I can build my models. Then all the work that data scientists love to do, right? We don't like doing the data engineering and the data wrangling that Ralph described. We like to do this, which is, hey, I've got several different ML models out there that I can use. Which one's the best one to use for this? So this is something called random forest. This does end up being the one that gets picked for this. But you'll notice I have 2 others that I'm also evaluating. So I'm the LGBM and then the random forest version 1. But what's really interesting is you can, right within the Fabric experience, you can run experiments to see which of these gives the best output. So here you're seeing that the gradient booster, and notice it gets a 0.865, but here's the random forest one that I ended up picking, and notice that's almost a 90% accuracy, so it's 88%. So that's the one I'm going to use. And so now I run the current data from the CRM system through this model, and then what happens is that becomes data. inside Fabric that, as Megan just mentioned, she's able to then populate back into the dashboard. So literally it's picking up the predictive model that sits on top of the data that was already there that Ralph showed you how he loaded it. That then becomes data that's available to the dashboard, and you'll see it showing up right here. All of these customers are showing that they're at a greater than 25% churn risk. And so what we can do from here is we want to get an active outbound campaign to start to have conversations to see if we can make sure that these customers stay with us. And the way we do that, and Jordan mentioned this, it's something called Smart Sync. If I push that button, what happens is that goes back to the CRM system, tags each of these customers, and schedules a call for the sales rep to follow up on them, and starts a whole nurture campaign. So it becomes a very closed loop process where you're really now taking advantage of that real time or near real time data to start to go back and take action against the insights that you've uncovered. So that is a very quick walkthrough of some of the things you can do from a data science standpoint. The other piece I wanted to show is I wanted to flip over, as Megan mentioned, the interesting role that has now come on board to Fabric is this idea of Copilot, who's your always on, always available assistant, who can help you kind of analyze and do some of the work in your data. So I thought I'd do just a real quick demo of that. But essentially what I've now done is I've added Copilot to that same set of data. So this is that same analysis that we just did for the churn report. And now I'm going to use Copilot to just interrogate it. So what I'm going to do here, you'll notice, is I can do things like this. I can just enter English commands. So what are the columns and column types that are in that clean data set? And what's really interesting here is when I run this, this is now using Copilot. Copilot, again, is an AI assistant. It's going to say, oh, okay, this is actually the command you can issue. I forgot how easy it is to do types, but it's actually helped me for that. It does remind you that this is AI, so it can at times make mistakes, so you'll want to watch that, just like we as humans can make mistakes. But now I can actually run that command. And notice it's saying, here are all the different columns and data types that are actually in that data set. Great, that's interesting, but I want to do a little bit more than that. I want to do something a little more complicated. And to spare you watching me do poor typing, I'm going to pop in something fairly sophisticated where I want to, I'm going to load that into Pandas from the Lakehouse, and I want to create a new field, because one of the things I think might be interesting is the outstanding balance that somebody owes us as a percent of their annual salary might be something very interesting. And I want to see that by credit score descending. Notice a couple of things here, though. I said salary. The field is actually estimated salary. Notice that I said score, but the actual score is called credit score. Notice I said Lakehouse. I didn't really say what Lakehouse. There's actually three, as Ralph noticed and mentioned to you. There's the bronze, silver, and gold. And basically, I just said create this new field from it. But now watch what happens. It interprets my English statement and does some inference. It says, okay, I think by salary, you probably mean estimated salary. I think by Lakehouse, you probably mean the one that we're in. And I think what you mean by score is credit score. So it figured all that out. How many of us have ever done code where you type something wrong? Now this assistant is helping me clean up my code. And notice it did exactly what I asked it to do. So it generated the PySpark language to do that. And notice it created this new field over here to the right called balance as percent of salary. That doesn't exist in this data frame. And so it's actually interpreted my English statement and generated some nice clean code. Well, now what I want to do is I want to take this a little bit further. And what I want to do is I now want to do, let's do something a little more visual. And so what I want to do is say, analyze the data. Notice I didn't say what data, and show the distribution chart of credit score. So what it's going to infer is that the data I mean is the data in the cell before, and it's going to pull it forward and again generate some MATLib commands, and it's going to do a quick plot for me. And so there's the distribution of the credit score. Notice 2 sentences I've gotten this data. And so now I want to go a little further. And this is one of the other things that you can do with Copilot that's pretty interesting. Instead of having it write code for you, have it help you ideate. And so what I want to do here, so now instead of code, I say, hey, let's just chat. Let's you and I both look at this together. And so would you analyze that data frame for me and recommend a few machine learning models? And so I can hit that. Now what will happen is it's going to look at the data we just populated. It's going to come back with some descriptions and suggestions of what I might want to do next. And imagine this as a new data scientist, as you're kind of learning how to do all this, where you've got now this assistant that's going to come along and recommend. So what it's telling me is this is the steps you need to go through. And then here are some of the models and evaluations that you might want to use. So saying, you know what, and we didn't do this one in the original. Maybe we look for some anomaly detection. Are there people that are setting off that, balance over salary would be an anomaly? We might see things that are out in a quadrant by themselves that kind of, hey, that balances as much as we're showing for salary. So obviously they're a huge risk. So this is just helping me guide through that. But think about that. We did all that without writing a single line of code, all just button clicks and pushing through. This is where we get quite excited about Copilot, because as a data scientist and a BI analyst, this is what you don't want to be doing. You don't want to be writing code. You want to be focusing on those data insights. We let Ralph do all that heavy data work. So that's in a nutshell the two pieces from a data scientist standpoint. And I'm going to push it back to Jordan.
Thanks for walking through that. So just quick recap of what we just saw. So we started off with Ralph and saw how as a data engineer, you can reliably get data out of systems and into a storage layer. We talked about the medallion architecture and how that data becomes cleaner over time and how that can be the fuel for other roles. Then we switched into the data analyst role, where Megan showed you how we're using that near real-time data to create visualizations that executives and team members can use every single day to run their business. We then also showed how Tony created a predictive model that we can surface not only in the dashboard, but also in other tools. And finally, we talked about Copilot and how that can make your data team more efficient, can make you more effective. It can help you drive new insights that you weren't expecting, all towards creating more business value quicker, faster, more easily with Interloop and Microsoft. So that was a pretty compelling demo, and thanks for walking through that. So as a final slide for this webinar, did want to offer to this group, thank you all for attending, a Fabric readiness assessment. So those that saw the demo today, maybe you see yourself in that demo as an organization that you've tried to do some of these things and are hitting roadblocks or challenges, or maybe you're just getting started on your journey and want to understand how do you turn Fabric on and get it up and running. We're here for you. So we want to offer as for this group a Fabric readiness assessment. So feel free to reach out to us. We'll be following up after the webinar. But really what we'd like to focus on is helping you build that business case. Why does something like Interloop and Microsoft Fabric make sense for your organization? What are some of those transformative data value elements that we can pull out that will really help you, drive your business forward? So if you're interested in that, please reach out to us. And other than that, we'll be continuing to talk and share our thoughts on Fabric and Interloop, and appreciate everyone coming today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.